This is an 8-iron, and it's a dead shank.
Wow.
Way right.
Oh, takes a hop off the path.
You gotta be kidding me. Very tough pitch shot right here. You gotta hit it into the hill, one hop up and bite, and it's in.
Kind of like that.
I would like to welcome back to the Sub 70 podcast, five-time PGA Tour winner, Ryder Cup member, and our insider to let us know how these great players think and play during these major type of events. We definitely had one yesterday, Mr. Ken Green. Ken, thanks again for joining us.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Well, we'll get to the players in a second, but first question is, how are things in your world? Are you playing and practicing a little bit? And I know last fall you were playing a little bit on the Champions Tour, so are we going to see you out there a little bit? And how's the game coming along? And how's life treating you?
You know, it's been kind of a not such a great winter for me. The leg has been acting up, so I haven't really been able to do as much as I would like. You know, and that's one of the problems of even trying to somewhat show up at an event and shoot a halfway decent score. You know, because I can't practice at all, and it just won't. The pain just won't allow me to practice. So, you know, it is what it is, and I'm okay with that part of it. I am going to play the PGA Senior at Oak Hill in Rochester, New York, in the end of May, for a couple of reasons. One, I love the golf course, and I wouldn't mind going back just to play it. And then the other is it's also timing with the release of my book. So we figured that's probably the best time to do that. So other than that, I'll probably maybe play one or two other events.
Well, what a great golf course to get to go play a major championship on the Champions Tour on, right? I mean, it's as iconic as it gets. I mean, that's got to get you wound up to the right way a little bit as well, right? Just to be out there competing on that level of a golf course.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, and this is something that probably happens with every professional golfer, is that, you know, when you're young and you're competing, you don't really understand the respect that you should be given every one of these golf courses, you know. And as you get old and you become a little more old, you realize how good these golf courses are. You know, whether it's Pebble Beach that I got to play last year. You know, I mean, I always knew Pebble was great and I loved it. It was my favorite, but I never appreciated that this could be the last time I play it. You know, I played Oak Hill and you know, the Open, and thinking it was in '89, and it's a great course, but you know. You appreciate it more now. You give it more respect. There's when you're young and playing, you're just trying to beat the course up, and you don't think about how lucky you are to be playing these golf courses, and to give them the respect that they deserve.
Well, it'll be great to see you out there competing against the other guys in the Champions Tour. We'll be watching. Excited for you to be out there doing it. But to the topic at hand, Players Championship. So first question I have is do you like the change from May back to March? And if so, or if not, why do you like either time slot more or less than the other?
I do like the change back to March. And for me, obvious reasons, you know, and I know this is going to sound weird to some people, but when Pete Dye designs that golf course, he knew the course was going to be set up in March. So when he designs each hole, he takes into account how the wind's going to blow in March in Florida. I know that sounds like you're really being kind of anal when you design a golf course, but this is what architects do. So it's going to play its best in March. You know, that being said, I believe the tour went easy on the guys because it was the first time back. You know, you see the numbers as good as they were. And the greens playing as soft as they were. I don't think you'll see that as, you know, in the next 2 or 3 years. I think they'll go back to how it used to play with, you know, really firm greens and, you know, mega fast greens.
You just think they didn't want to go overboard on this first go around, and then I'm assuming, will they keep overseeding like they did with that ride to kind of help the greens maintain and and have a little better visual to the golf course? I mean, did you like that
Yeah,
idea of them doing it?
They have to. There's no other way. It gets too cold in the months of January, and everything would be just dormant. And they don't want that. It just won't look right. But you can, just because it's overseeded doesn't mean you can't get it to be hard and firm. And they just went easy. And I can I don't know if they'll sit there and admit that, but they did, and they know it. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's, I guess, the worst thing in the world you want is to move to March, get some bad weather and wind, and have the players bitching. So they went the right way.
Yeah, but you would like to see it go back to a little bit more of the faster, firmer conditions. You think it'd just be a better overall test. If they get to where you want it, it'll even be, you think, more exciting, more challenging if they kind of get back to the way they had it, say, 15 years ago. Is that something you would look forward to seeing the players having to try to take into account?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I honestly think they have to do something with 16, 17, and 18, because let's face it, that's what people remember. The last three holes, and what happens, what doesn't, whether, and because of the distance they're hitting it's just getting a joke. I mean, the idea that Rory hits a 9-iron into 16 is comical, and granted he's long and all that, but most of the guys it's not a scary shot, and I can promise you, back in the day, you were hitting 3 woods, 5 woods. It's a scary shot with a 3 wood, 5 wood in your hand. And, right now, I think Rahm hit an 8-iron, and it's just like, that's for the quality of players that they are. You're not even going to have one little bump in the heart, but you're going to have a bump in the heart if you got a 3 wood or a 5 wood in your hand.
No, that makes
17,
sense. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. 17 is another example, and that with today's ball not moving much, left to right, right to left, because of the quality of the ball, it's nowhere near as intimidating a shot. I mean, they're hitting gap wedges, and it's just, you gotta put a little pucker in their brain, because if you don't, it's too easy a shot. So and I'm almost positive this will never happen, but it needs to go back about 15 yards. So they're hitting a club that's going to make them think when that wind starts blowing. I mean, I know we didn't hit it as far back in the day, but I've hit as much as a 6-iron in that hole. And let me tell you, I don't care how fearless you are, because I was relatively fearless because I wasn't too bright. But if you have a 6-iron in your hand, it's hard. But you got to at least put it like an 8-iron in their hand, and then they'll have a little more of a
Right.
And then 18 is comical how short that hole plays now. I mean, it used to be a beast. I mean, if you bombed the drive, you were lucky to have a 5-iron in.
And you had to hit a draw back then, right? Because the power fade just wouldn't work, right? You had to take it on and hit the hook.
Well, the other thing that most people don't realize is there was a tree on the right side of the fairway back then that if you were literally blocked out if you hit it on the right side of the fairway. So it was tighter than tight. And that tree died, and they elected not to replace it. So it's 40 yards wide, which is plenty wide enough. But if you're going to leave it that wide, you've got again, you want to put a little pucker in their head, So it's okay. I got to hit a good drive, and then I'm going to hit a 5-iron. Now I hit a good drive and I have a wedge.
Well, yeah, let me ask you on that, because I saw Rory said he's hitting a fade on that hole, and of course the hole goes right to left. Now, as a professional, if you can still carry that, yet having the ball move away from the trouble, that makes that shot a hell of a lot easier, right? If you can still get it out there to the fat part of that fairway and have an angle, yet you can move it away from the trouble. That has to make all the difference in the world, I'm assuming. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, in the perfect world, anybody who moves the ball left to right or right to left consistently would rather move it at the at the danger. And for instance, 18 would be the water. So if you know you're going to fade the ball, you just literally hit it down, the 5-yard line of the edge of the water. And it just goes. Because if you have no fear of double crossing yourself, you now make the hole a lot wider. Whereas if you're a drawer of the ball, you can actually overhook it.
Right.
And get yourself in the water. And that's in your head. And that's why you never see guys do it. And they always block it out to the right. Whether people realize it or not, we players always have those thoughts in our head. We're not immune to overthinking, because that's what we'll do sometimes. You overthink it.
Right. So back to your point, but it is easier on that drive, for instance, with the modern equipment, because it's harder to draw that ball with the modern equipment, right? It's easier to hit that little squeeze fade or 1-foot fade. That tee shot has to be a hell of a lot easier knowing you don't have to turn it, where he could kind of carry that corner with the ball moving away versus, like you said, if you start to turn it a little too much, that draw can turn into a power draw a little bit, and you're flirting with the water. I'm assuming if I'm going to get in your head, if you can hit a little baby fade yet still carry that portion and have whatever you had in a 8-iron, 9-iron, I'm assuming in your head that sets up easier for players of your level.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
There's no doubt about it. He did not have any fear of God. When Rory's on, he plays fearless golf and drives it, just phenomenal. Rory reminds me of Greg Norman in my day. Greg was clearly the best driver of the ball back in the day, where he had more distance than most and could drive it, straight. And it's that's what Rory does now. And believe it or not, the first hole is a harder driving hole than the 18th hole is now, which is kind of weird. But that hole is really gets in guys' heads, and that's what Pete Dye does. With if anyone has played the golf course, most of the holes out there have a little angle to them, and that's always the trickiest kind of golf to play. Like a Dustin Johnson would rather have, all right, if I carry over this hazard or this bunker, all I got to do is hit it, and boom, they do it. But if you have to think and you have to angle the ball and play, making decisions as to which way's the best to play the hole, then that's when we start overthinking and we get in our own way.
Hey everyone, it's Jason Hyland at the Sub 70 Podcast. Golf season is getting really close no matter what part of the country that you're in, and hopefully it's warm enough where you're in that you're already playing golf. But if you do need some new clubs for this season, please check us out at golfsub70.com. From forged irons to forged wedges, hybrids, fairway woods, game improvement irons, we have the whole arena. Also, our new driver, the 839D, should be in stock somewhere right around middle of March. The guys at My Golf Spy put it through some testing, along with the guys at Plugged In Golf. Also gave it a review. Feel free to check it out. If you have any questions on that or any other product, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast. Well, since you brought up the golf course, let's talk about it. So, and I'm going off memory here from our previous conversations, but I think you really like the golf course as a test for a really big golf tournament. And if that is correct from my side, what makes that golf course appealing or fun for you guys when you're out there competing for that level of a trophy?
I love the golf course. Now, as weird as this is going to sound, I'm not going to give Pete Dye credit because they had to redo it 6 different times, before they did it. So, I'll give him a 1 star because he had the right idea. He just kind of screwed a few things up. And the biggest asset it has is the driving. It really makes you think. They do need to stretch it out a little more for today's players. I don't know. I think it only plays almost 7,300 or something, which is probably the equivalent of 6,600 back in our day. But it still makes you think off the tee, which is the number one thing you want with a driver. And then he makes you really have to pay attention with your iron shot, because if you miss the green in certain spots, you're not up and down in it. And, that's what I was saying about with everything being so soft this year. There wasn't that dead zone. where a guy knew that if he went left of the pin, he's only up and down it, 20% of the time. And that's the other beauty of the golf course is not only first you have to think about with the driver, then you have to think about angles with the second shot. When do I attack the pin? When do I not attack the pin? And then, of course, you have to have a great short game because the greens are such sloping the right way and just high enough off the ground that if you leave them in the bunkers, it's really tricky. If you get it in the little what they call the little run up areas, you have to decide: do I run it up or do I try to pinch and spin it? And the more thoughts you give a great player, the better chance you have of making them look like a normal golfer.
Did you play the golf course aggressively, or did you have to be patient and let the golf course come to you? And then was it more about angles that you would try to get? Because you were an aggressive player, so was it a learning curve, or did you have to back it down from the normal way you played?
I would say it was a learning curve that I never learned because I just, I was just way too aggressive, and it just didn't dawn on me, that. I had numerous good rounds on TPCs or any other major, courses, but then I paid the price on many others. And it's because, I didn't realize. I just blamed myself. When I tried to pull something off and didn't execute right, I just blamed myself. That was my fault. But in reality, I wasn't good enough to be trying to continually hit these shots. I could pull off, 60, 70% of them. But when you don't pull off 95, you're dead. And that's where Jack Nicklaus is so great when it comes to major golf, is that he knew that he was going to play everything very conservative and basically let everyone else make their mistakes. That's the reason why he has so many second place finishes, is because he just kept playing conservative golf and he knew when to go for the birdie. He would wait for the right time. And other times he had no plans on ever even thinking about making a birdie. It was a par all the way. And, that's why he's so good. Now, Tiger, on the other hand, has a little of Jack in him, but he also has a little of that I'm going to be aggressive, because Tiger was, in all probability, a better ball striker when it came to irons. In today's world, our medium swings in today's world don't turn out so bad. A medium swing back in the 60s and the 70s, you usually miss the green. And Jack knew that. It's not that Jack, if you put Jack in his prime today, he would be probably better than Tiger, and he would hit just as many aggressive shots. But, you're born when you're born. You can't fault either one of them. But that was Jack's plan. If he honestly thought that one day a Tiger Woods or a Penny Hardaway would come along and wipe out his records, I honestly think he would have been a little more aggressive. And those 19 second place finishes might not have been 19. He probably would have had 4 or 5 more wins and maybe 3 or 4 less second places where he got aggressive and it didn't work out.
It's so hard to compare the eras, right? Because of the equipment, the way you had to play. It's almost like really two different games, right? And you assume all the greatest would have figured out a way to optimize themselves in that generation.
Yeah, it's really unfair. I think everybody on the planet pretty much believes that it's either Jack or Tiger. And, some people are in the Tiger camp, some people are in the Jack camp. But it is unfair to both because they were both way ahead of everybody else in their era. I'm in the Jack camp, and eventually time will go on. There's going to come a time when Jack's hardly mentioned, and because the only people alive are going to be the people that knew the Tiger name. It's like people have already forgotten that, when Jack was trying to catch Bobby Jones was the number. It was 13. No one else was mentioned. It was Bobby Jones. And, Bobby Jones isn't even mentioned now. There's no one alive that even saw Bobby play, probably. and eventually that's going to happen to Jack, and he's got a chance because he's still going to have the top of the majors, and but that's just nature. I mean, time goes on. Who knows what's going to happen in 100 years from now?
It's interesting you were bringing up the, in a generic sense, patience and how that is difficult on the golf course. And I got a two-part question here for you, because I was watching Rory during the press conference, and he said he's had a really solid year, like all top tens, but he said he had, even though he's playing that good, he had to get more patient in letting these tournaments kind of come to him versus always wanting to force it. And is that something you can relate to? In other words, you were on tour for a long time, you've won. Is that something that makes sense? And then did you ever go through that when you were playing on the tour in your 40s as you got older? Is that a natural propensity as the players have been out there for a while that is the right mindset? You can't play that aggressive all the time. And sometimes did you win golf tournaments where you see kind of Rory win this? It kind of just comes to you and you don't force it. Does that make sense as his comments that he was talking about of just trying to be more patient and letting it come versus putting the pedal down all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. It's he's an aggressive player. And in today's world, one of the negatives about today's world versus, say, Jack's world or even my world was you didn't have 24/7 golf news and the media just on top of you. The media is desperately searching for that next Tiger or Jack. And, a few years ago, they thought Spieth was going to be the guy. And so that puts a lot of pressure on you, and now Rory's, in my opinion, is the most capable of putting that run and ending up with double-digit majors. He gets on those rolls. And once he learns, basically, in my opinion, what he's saying is, I got to stop listening to the world and just relax, along with, not being so aggressive. Just, play a little smarter and understand that, I'm not going to hit every shot perfect. And he has enough firepower that he's going to eat up some golf courses when he gets going. I mean, if, they get on Rory for not being consistent, well, who would you rather be? Charles Howell, who makes a lot of money, or Rory, who wins the big ones and misses some cuts here and there because he's just, aggressive. Now, he can pull that back a little and make a few more, but what good is that? He's got to be who he is as long as he understands not to overdo it. And I think he's just been trying too hard and it's gotten in his head. I mean, he's that good. When you can drive it as well as he does and doesn't seem to have the fear, it's all about his putter right now. And to answer your other question is, I think as you do age on tour, the thing, what makes you realize how foolish you maybe used to play or still are playing is by watching people that you're paired with, and you're seeing them do the mistakes that you made many moons ago and maybe still are making. So then it pops in your head, oh, maybe that isn't such a bright way of playing the golf course, because in your mind you thought that was perfectly logical.
So it's a pretty normal process he's going through as he matures through his career, and it's something that a lot of players will go through. They play smarter as they get a little bit older, and he's still young enough, obviously, where he could have another great, 10 years in front of him at least, right? I mean, if he can...
Oh, yeah, he sorry to interrupt, but he's got, what is he, 30? Did he just turn 30 or something?
Yeah, right around there. Yep.
With today's technology, you literally have till you're 50. And I have said forever that I thought Tiger would win a major in his 50s. It's just a different world now. It's part of it's the physical part of it, that they're in better shape, but it's 80% of it is the equipment. You just, when you were 45 or 6 or 7 in Jack's era, playing persimmon and that ball back then, that little focus that you just don't quite have at 48, 47 that you had at 27, 37, that middle swing, you paid for back then. Whereas now you're not paying for those swings with the technology. So you're going to be able to get away with it. And then with today's greens, if you can still putt, you're going to win. I think there's been a couple of guys in the last couple of years that won on tour over 50. And if you can win on tour over 50, you can win. Tiger loves Augusta. Jack loved Augusta. I think Jack was in contention when he was 58 once. Look what Watson did at 59.
Yep.
It's going to happen.
Well, speaking of guys, later in their career, Furyk this week, 48 years old, coming off a break where he's Ryder Cup captain, so golf wasn't a huge priority, I'd have to imagine. I'm in my 40s, so I love watching these guys when they kind of get back into contention. What did you think of his performance? And does this sort of fall in line of exactly what you just talked about 30 seconds ago, that if your mind is there and physically he's still in good shape, he can still compete? The equipment helps with it, and his experience, and I'm guessing from what you just said on the other side of it, you're not surprised he can still compete in the biggest events in the world at 48 years old.
Yeah, I'm not at all. I think Furyk has obviously had a great career. And, like you said, with the Ryder Cup, he probably wasn't as focused. And in the game of golf, you have to be so focused, it's scary. Because literally, it's the only sport that I can think of off the top of my head that one shot costs you the tournament. And no other sport can you say that, that happens on a regular basis. This is every week. One shot costs, because most events are within one or two shots, right? So all it takes is one or two. And so as you age, as I was just explaining, your focus just isn't as sharp. And he played great. He had that one boo-boo, and it's that one shot, missing that little 3.5 footer. But that's that one shot. But I think Fred Funk won it. The great thing about the TPC golf course is that it's not set up for any style of player. You just have to play it well that week. And any style player can do it, whether it's the Bomber or the Fred Funks or the Jim Furyks. And it's there. Whereas if you go to Augusta, it pretty much favors that one style player. And that's why, Jack's won it so many times, and Tiger's won it so many times, and Phil's won it. It sets up to it. Whereas, TPC, I believe Jack's the only one that's won it 3 times, and he did it before we started playing TPC.
Right.
So in reality, he hasn't done it either. I think there's, I don't know, this is off the top of my head, I think there's 2 or 3 guys that have won it twice.
Yeah.
And that's it. But if you look at all the other majors, there's some guys that won each one 5 times or more. And it's just that hard at TPC because everyone's in contention. Whereas many of the majors, you can wipe out half the field simply because of the style of golf they play versus what's needed for that golf course.
Well, speaking of young guys who play aggressive, the John Rahm scenario on Sunday in hole 11, strange back and forth with the caddy. You could see the caddy was trying to pull him off of it. It's interesting to watch it. And my first question is, what's your opinion of what happened there? And then, as a professional, how far can that caddy go, or how far were you comfortable of your caddy going where he could call you off? It's your call in the end, but did his caddy do exactly what the caddy is supposed to do, or how does that work when that caddy is that adamant of he does not like this play?
It literally depends on the relationship the two of you have. If my caddy had ever done anything like that, he would have been told, if you ever do it again, you're gone. But today they use the caddies more. So I don't know what, it's hard to say without knowing for sure, but it looked like he had to hook that ball about 30 yards.
Yes. Yep.
And, out of the bunker, that is so hard because, you have to have that, to get a ball to move that far in today's world, their power and strength is necessary, which they have. But the other is your balance and has to be perfect. And when you're in a bunker, that's I don't get why he would do that. And as aggressive as I was, my theory was, if I can't make eagle, while I'm attempting this shot, what's the point of going for it? Maybe, some guys will say, well, it's an easier up and down, but when you're in a scenario like he was, I think he just had an absolute brain fart. I think some of it was probably because he was really ticked at himself for the way he'd played so far, but he was still in the tournament. There's a time to get ticked at yourself, and there's a time to still play smart golf. And he wasn't making eagle, because even if he hooks it around and hits the perfect shot, it's still going to run off the green anyway. Because it's going to be hooking so much, it's going to hit the front left part, the front center part, and then it's going to go hard left once it goes. So he's still going to have a 40-yard pitch no matter what. And where that pin was, he would, you have to come up short, because if you hit it too firm, you go rolling in the bunker. So it made no sense.
Yeah, and he's so good with his wedges. He's a good putter. Like, what's his chances of making a birdie from 100 yards? 55, 60%? I mean, right? It's still in his wheelhouse, per se. It was an interesting scenario to see unfold. Do you like his aggression, that he has that kind of self-belief, and he's young? Do you like that in a player overall? Would you rather see that on the front end and he'll learn in time? Or is that something that could really come back and keep biting him in the ass over and over again if he doesn't sort of think better on the golf course and letting his emotions sort of get in front of a thought process that it's sort of needed on the PGA Tour?
Yeah, he's going to learn. I mean, let's remember, people forget 24 is 24. And I think he'll come to realize that there's certain times to be aggressive and certain times not. I have no problem with him showing his emotion. I'm a firm believer that you have to be who you are. And if you're a person who shows your emotion, if you're just playing a ping pong match, then be that way on the golf course. I can't say enough to if there's anyone young out there, just be who you are. I'm not saying be disrespectful to you or to golf or to anyone, but if you're a talker and you get angry because you're annoyed you missed a shot, it's okay. As long as you can shut it off by the time you hit the next shot. But it just seems like John, he just, that start he got off to, and he was probably just shocked, because in his mind he wasn't going to do that, and I'm sure his warm up was probably fine, and then all of a sudden he goes out there and he realized, oh, this is the little extra pressure, and he'll figure that out. I mean, it's a learning process.
Do you think this golf tournament should be considered a major championship? Would you be fine with that turning into the fifth one? They have that on the LPGA Tour. They have it on the Champions Tour that you play. Do you think it would diminish, quote unquote, majors, or would you be fine with calling that a fifth major?
I think it's insane that it's not. I mean, if you ask anybody, what are the five essentials that in order to accomplish a major, it has all of them. And it's getting very close. They're starting to realize it now. And in my book, I go into detail as to why it's not already, because in the early 80s, it was about to be knighted. And then there was an issue with Jack and Palmer and Watson and Dean Beam and stuff. So Jack and those guys quickly knocked it down, and it was all personal. And it's insane that it's not a major, because I mean, it has the best field. It has that finishing 3 holes that people all know. No one ever skips it. To me, that's how you decide what's a great event and what isn't. The easiest way to do it is, does everyone show up? Because remember Lee Trevino way back when? He didn't play the Masters for a few years because he knew he just had no chance. And so he said, why go where I know I'm going to get beat up? And, he eventually felt he made a mistake in doing that. But, everyone shows up. They never, in the early, I think it was Rory or it was either Rory or a European player that didn't play a couple times because he said he didn't like it, and then he's learned. You'll have to do my homework for me, but it might have been Rory that skipped it. Or
yeah, I can't remember who that was, but I think it's growing in stature too. Like I was glued to the TV like it was a major last year, or like it was a major championship, and I had the golf writer Eamon Lynch from Golf Week on last week to talk of a preview, and we said we're going to have you on to talk about sort of the recap of what happened. And he's now arguing it should be a major. And I asked him a question that he said didn't know which way he would go, so I'll throw it out there for you as well. So let's say they make it a major. It feels like a major to me, so let's say they make it a major. Do you have to go back in time then and give Steve Elkington 2 more, so he's 3 total? Is that the only fair way then to do it?
Well, I mean, I guess you'd almost have to in that sense. But herein lies the big question of, if you do it that way, is it because it's at TPC? Because the first 8 years they rotated,
right?
But other majors have rotated, so that's not fair to those guys who won it then. But as you know, I believe that there are big tournaments. I don't know if I really call them majors. I don't think it's fair to guys that say they never won a major, but that some guys have won 14 events in their year, which is, I'm not saying it's Hall of Fame, but it's still a great career, and they don't get any credit for having a great career, like Bruce Liskey, who just passed away. He had a great career. I think he won either 13 or 14 times, and no one gives him any credit for being a great player because they don't quote doesn't have the major. And it's I just don't know if it's fair. Back in the 40s and the 50s, the majors were different events, so they switched them all.
Right.
Jack's the one that redefined what majors were. He's the one that pushed it. It's about major golf. Jack Nicklaus created the majors.
That's what Eamon was saying too. That like the first Masters wasn't really a major; it was sort of like a Bobby Jones get together. Yet when Gene Sarazen wins the third one or second one, whatever it was, they considered it essentially looking back a major. So he said it's a moving river all the time anyway. So he would have no problem of calling this what it is, and he thinks it's a major because it's never been exactly what you're saying. Is the U.S. Amateur a major now? Well,
right.
It was at one point, right? So it's ebbed and flowed forever.
Right. Yeah. Believe it or not, the Western Open,
right,
was the major, the big one. And I really don't have a problem with it because let's face it. In the end, when the writers all get together, say all you whack nuts go into a room and get together, and say it's 60 years from now, and there's 2 other guys that have come along, and you're still only going to remember the top 3 players. If you're going to fight it out between Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods, and this other guy that just has come along, well, why is he better? Well, why is he better? And so the guy like a Steve Elkington who won 2 or 3, or a Curtis Strange or a Fred Couples, well, do you give him credit for 1 or do you give him credit for 3? Isn't going to have 1 iota of difference in the history of golf, because you're only concerned about the stud of studs, when in the bottom line, like who's the best ever, or the second best ever, the third best. Those guys will never fall in that category. So it's not like you're going to promote someone way up and you're not going to promote another. But the players know. If you went and asked every player, it's crazy that they wouldn't do it, And in reality, and I don't mean to keep plugging my book here, but if say there was a law that you could only have 4 majors, period, what one would you give the boot? And to me, it would be the Masters. And it might be the most exciting event to watch in golf, but it's not. It's no way it should be given major status, because it's set up for a certain style player. It's limited fields, and it has the weakest fields. So when you look at the Masters will never have a John Daly or a Michael Campbell, come out of nowhere that no one expected and win a major. because he's not in the field.
Yeah, field's too limited. Field's too limited.
Right. So I really think that if history really wants to evaluate the better players, I mean, like we were talking earlier, the TPC is clearly the hardest event to win, simply by the fact that no one's won it more than twice.
And the players will admit that, of how difficult this is to win on this golf course, right? Rory could miss the cut next year. It can happen, right?
Yep.
Like, it is that fine of a line. But back to your point, I think it would change people's careers, right? So, like, people kind of might look at Ricky Fowler with that talent, and let's just say they retroactively made the Players a major. I think people view him differently, right? Now, all of a sudden, if he's got 5 wins, he's barely 30, and one of those is a major, I think he moves, and not for the all-time greats, but from his current generation. Matt Kuchar, Players champion, right, with 9 wins or whatever he has now. I think they're viewed differently. I mean, I see those guys winning the Players Championship, and in my mind, you know, they've proven to me they can win at the highest level. But I think the overall golf fan, there's got to be a little bit different level of admiration, respect, not from the players, because like you said, that fraternity, you guys all know what it takes to win it. But from the general golf fan, I still think, yeah, that guy's won a major, right? You watch a guy in that age, that guy's won a major. I think if the Players became a major, I think Ricky Fowler or Kuchar, for example, are viewed by the general golf fans a little bit different.
Oh, they might very well be. I mean, I you know, obviously I can't speak for those individuals, but you know, I the best thing it probably would do for someone like a Ricky is, because, you know, he's getting to that stage where, you know, he's pressing. You know, is
Right.
he pressing too much?
Right.
They expected so much out of the young man, and you know, he's got to remember that Mickelson didn't win until he was 33. You know, and he ended up with 5. So there's tons of time left for someone like a Ricky or something like that. But you know, like we were talking earlier, when a player gets that inner demon in his head where he starts trying too hard, it makes it that much harder to win.
So you're saying he might be freed up a little if they retroed it backwards tomorrow and said you're a major champion. There has to, like you said, you could play with a little bit of freedom in that, right? Where now he's considered a major champion. No, it's going to be interesting how this debate goes on, because I think the event, I enjoyed watching it as much as I've ever watched it, and appreciated it even more of how fun the golf course is and how crazy the leaderboard is. And most of the guys kind of puked, and Rory came through and he needed, like, there was such great storylines. It felt like a major championship. So I wasn't on board with it. And the more I kind of watched this week, I'm like, yeah, this should be a major, man. Like, this one is huge and it's getting bigger. So
yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, you know, like you're saying, just look at yesterday. I mean, for a while there was like 8, 9, 10 guys all right there.
Yeah.
I mean, within one shot, and, you know, a couple more at 2. And it's like, and they all just didn't quite get it done. I mean, there's no other way around it. I mean, and only the player, and they'll never admit it. There's you know, only the players can tell you, yeah, I ended up, you know, bogeying this hole because I was thinking of this or that, you know, which they should never do, you know. And it would be interesting if somebody would come along and actually be honest once, because if you admit something like that, you know, people will look at you like you're some sort of loser. And, you know, to me, it's the other way around. If you don't face and admit your demons, you'll never beat them. And it's it's unfortunate, but I honestly think it's on its way. It's just a matter of when they're going to say, okay.
Well, let's talk about this book. I didn't know you were actually writing a book, so this is news to me. So as a couple last question here, follow-ups. What inspired you to do it? What's as a golf fan, will I kind of take away from it, you know, in general, and when's the book coming out?
Well, the book will be out mid-May. Actually, I was gonna. We're close to getting the website fixed for if people want to pre-order, and you know they'll I'll give you all that info. But you know, there's 2 reasons I wanted to really write the book. One is, whether I like it or not, my life has been bizarre. I've had so many unfortunate things happen in life, and there's I'm coming out with something that's even, it's going to be pretty intense, that happened to me. And, you know, I thought it's like, if I can convince one person who struggled with anything, I mean, it can be the depression, it can be losing your child or losing a wife, you know, the sexual abuse and what happened afterwards. If I can help somebody and let them realize it's okay to fall and then get back up, you can keep trying, and life is worth fighting for. So that's my main reason. And the other is there's a lot of good fun stories in there. You know, I mean, it's just, you know, I mean, obviously I'm biased because it's been my life, but, you know, I mean, how many people can tell the Gator story or, you know, all the different things that have happened in my life and the, you know, the stories on tour and stuff like that. It's been a wild run. I mean, and so I said, you know what? You know, I'm getting old now. It's pretty much over. It's time to, if you're going to do it, it's time to do it. So I said, all right, let's do it.
Very interesting. I'll definitely want to. I'm definitely going to want to read it. I've always enjoyed. Yeah, obviously, it's why I keep asking you back on the podcast. It's always just a fascinating, interesting conversation of your perspective of what you see, and like you said, you've seen a lot in your career. You've been in every side of the scenario. So I always find our conversations interesting, really interesting, and I imagine the book will be really interesting as well. So maybe we'll get you back on when the book actually launches and kind of talk about that a little bit, and you know, give our listeners a little bit of insight of a few more of the great stories and what people can kind of learn and take away from it. It sounds absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to get a copy of it and read it. So should be really, really cool.
All right, man. I appreciate that.
Well, thanks for being on. I appreciate your insights as always, and take care of yourself. And we'll look for you at a few of the Champions Tour events. And definitely looking for you at the Senior PGA Championship. Should be fun to watch.
All right, buddy.
Thanks, Ken. Have a great day.